we're going to talk about the 7 red flags that I see in dating time and time again. But here's the catch. There's 5 red flags for them, the person you're deciding on whether or not to date, and 2 for you. Because we're about tough love in this business, and I want to make sure that you're being the best version of yourself when you're presenting yourself to future spouses. I care about you and your future, and so we have to be pouring into ourselves just as much as we're expecting that effort from other people. Now, just to preface, these are things that I'm seeing in the Catholic dating scene as well as in the rest of the world. So it's not just related to Catholic dating, although there are nuances to the relationships that want faith as a pillar and that shared faith. And so we'll talk about those nuances, but all 7 of these are very relevant to anyone in the dating space. Now, I've had my fair share of witnessing these red flags in real life. And to be honest, there have been times where I felt like it was just easier to throw the towel in, right? To just give up on dating altogether, because it seems like if someone didn't possess all of these red flags, at least one of them was present, which just didn't seem fair. Because what I really wanted was a dating experience where I was honored in who I am and where I felt seen. But that just didn't happen. I kept getting all of these experiences where I was just seeing the same things until I realized it didn't have to be that way. And if I wanted a better dating experience, it began with me. And so I started showing up as someone who wouldn't take what these people were offering in their red flags and all of their things that I didn't really align with. And I decided that I was only going to get into a relationship where I felt like I was honored and that I felt seen. Now I look out for these red flags and others. And like I said, this is going to be a little bit of tough love because there's some for them and some for you, because we're on this journey together. So the first red flag that we're going to talk about today is not taking what you say seriously. So this is a red flag for them. If they are not respecting what you're saying, or they nod along, say, yep, 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 and then they go back on that because they're not taking what you say seriously, whether it be a boundary, your feelings, your expectations, something that you wish they could change, or, I'm not really, I'm concerned about this, and they're not taking it seriously, that is a red flag, because that means they don't respect you. They don't respect your opinion, and sometimes that is really hard to change. So if they're showing you from an early time that they don't take what you say seriously, it's best to move on from that person. Now, the second red flag is that their words and their actions don't match up. Now, listen, this is one of those red flags that gets so overlooked because people can be so good at convincing us what we want to hear. They can be so good at convincing us that they're changing, or that won't ever happen again, or I am this way. But their actions oftentimes tell a different story. And we want to hear those nice things. We want to hear, how they're working on themselves and how all of these things work out for them because they are involved in all those things. That's something that we want. We're drawn to that. So in a sense, it's not really our fault for being drawn to that. Attraction is part of this whole experience. And we can be attracted to the character of the person. In fact, we ought to be attracted to the character of the person. And so when they are talking about their character, but showing a different character, we have to listen to what they're showing us, because words are cheap. And actions, whether they do what they say they're going to do or not, speak louder than words. They do. It's not just a catchphrase. It's not just, something that people say. It's actually what we need to be taking account of, whether or not they are doing what they're saying or they're treating you the way that they say they value you. That's also a huge one. Getting into experiences where they say they value you, they say we want the same things, they say your boundaries are really important, but then they go and do the opposite. That's not going to lead to respect and love down the road. They're stuck in their minds, they're stuck in their selfishness, and not really much we can say will change the way that is. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but you are in control of how you show up. You are in control of your growth, and that is all you're in control of. We cannot control someone else. We cannot will them to put more effort in. We cannot will them to put more effort into their own development, their own journey of growth. The only thing we can control is ourselves. And so if you're stuck in a situation where time and time again, you're begging them, hey, do the actual thing you're saying, and they are coming back to you with words of promises and all of those things, then you have to realize that you can't change them. You can't will them to have the effort that you want them to have. They have to come to that conclusion themselves. They have to work at it. They have to have the discipline. And that's the only way that it's going to work. Now, not saying that people can never change and that the influence you have on people doesn't end up changing them. That's not saying any of that. But it's saying at the deepest root of change, it has to be that person's idea, that person's motivation. Because if they don't have that piece that they are in all the way, if they don't have that compelling reason for themselves, whether they start on a journey of growth, it won't last very long, because you need that compelling reason. That's how humans are built. We have to have that thing that is driving us. Now, the third red flag that I see a lot of times is describing in detail their future with you far too soon. Now, dreaming together and looking at your future is not a bad thing when it's appropriate, right? I actually found on Instagram last night, someone was talking about this new fad in dating to watch out for, like this bad kind of trend that they're seeing, and they called it something. But in essence, it's like kind of like love bombing, but in the sense of future bombing. Like, hey, all of these things are going to happen. We're going to have this wonderful life together. We are like actual details of what life will look like together in the future far too soon. And here's what it's actually doing. It's removing you from reality. It's not taking it at the pace that it's at. So you don't even know yet if you're compatible. You don't even know yet if your values align. You don't even know yet truly if the attraction and all the elements are there, right? We know pretty quickly if there's like physical attraction, if there's, that type of attraction, but we also have to get to know the person and get to know their character, and there's attraction there. We have to get to know their values and their goals and their aspirations. There's attraction found there too. So when you present the future in such a detailed way early on, you're skipping all of that. And when you're skipping all of that, you're really skipping the foundation that you need to have a dating relationship actually last, that leads to an actual future. So that is something to look out for. And apparently, according to the internet, it is on the rise. So make sure you're looking out for that and not to fall into that trap too early. Okay, so the fourth thing, and this is a big one, and most people say this is a huge red flag, especially in Christian Catholic communities, wanting to be intimate really quickly. Now, I get it. This is what we're made for. We all have this drive. We want to be close to one another. But wanting and pressuring you to be intimate early on, way too fast, is a sign that other things are going on. Yes, it's a sign that they are really influenced by the culture, because that is everywhere. But more importantly, it's a sign that what they're after is that. Because if you're after a real relationship, you would be okay waiting a little bit. You would be have this dominion over your own desires. You would have that self-mastery in order to build the relationship, in order to get to a place where that is more feasible. Now, culture has totally brainwashed us into this. I have yet to see a movie recently where, there's all this buildup, there's all this tension for their relationship to kind of start, and then they have their first kiss, which just goes into being intimate like all the way. There's no graduation, there's no gradual growth of this. And here's what I always say. So there's three aspects to a relationship. There's the physical aspect, there's the emotional aspect, and there's the spiritual aspect. And all three of these really need to be aware that they have to grow at somewhat of the same speed. Okay, I went to a really Catholic university, and there, one of the downfalls was that the spiritual intimacy was just like so far, so fast, like right away. And that is not healthy either. So we want to watch out for that, but we also want to watch out for an imbalance of physical intimacy when the others are so far behind. It can, our biology tells us that it can lead to so many issues. Our minds are not meant for that, because as human beings, we were created for one man and one woman to be united with each other for life. And that type of intimacy belongs in that committed relationship because it protects it, because it protects each individual in it, protects the union, and it protects our hearts and our minds from any other possible outcome. And that is not something that is talked about a lot. It's not something that is popular in 2026 and in the modern world, but it's nonetheless true. And the more we talk about it, the more we live this out, the more we demand it of our partners as we're dating and discerning people to date, the more that the truth gets honored. And not only that, but that you protect yourself. Now, I think it was last summer, I went on or it was in the spring, and I went on this date with this young man, and it was going well. I thought we had a good conversation. Now, this is the first date we had, and following, as we had both agreed on the date that we would see each other again, before he could make a plan to see me again, he asked me, are we going to, sleep together? And like soon. And it struck me as odd, not because that was the question. I've been asked that several times. It's the dating world we live in. But it was the fact that he had to check to make sure before he saw me again. And that to me was just shocking at how far our culture has come. Because not only do we expect it, and it's, kind of bold to stand up and say, no, I won't be doing this, and this is my boundary. That is bold. But now we are taking even that conversation, that intimate conversation about being intimate, and putting it in a text message after you had one conversation. And you're just making sure that is, the possibility. And to me, to my being, it really felt just so sterile. It felt so sterile because it wasn't taking into account our relationship. It wasn't taking into account either one of us. It was just this bland, sterile question that led me to think, hey, this is like really not okay. And if this is how far our culture has come, where we won't even give each other the time of day if that's not a possibility, and then we have to check over text beforehand, that is wild to me. So if that's ever happened to you, I feel you. I'm there with you. And if you're doing that, stop. Please stop that, because that's crazy. We're just not built for it. And so anything out of the ordinary, out of what we're built for, is going to hurt us, including making it something so sterile and making it something that is expected early on in order to even be in a relationship. That is putting the cart before the horse. That is doing things in the wrong order. Because when you're intimate with someone, yes, you learn a lot about them, you gain that closeness, that intimacy, but it is nowhere near the level that it could be if you have the foundation of a strong relationship underneath you, where these things are growing at the right time, where you're also emotionally mature in your relationship, where you're also spiritually mature in your relationship, to where you can get to the point where when husband and wife come together, especially if they've been waiting all along, and they say their vows on the altar and they're able to come together and be intimate for the first time, it is such a full experience where we're just getting like a crumb of that in the world. With it's so far beyond hookup culture anymore. It is just completely taking intimacy out of even a relationship, which in my opinion is no way to live. Okay, so we've talked that one to death, kind of. So the fifth and the last red flag for the other person is inconsistency in communication. Now, we all know that communication is really important in any relationship and just for life in general. But inconsistency is the thing to look out for. So for all the women out there, for all the men out there, if someone you are pursuing or in a, being pursued by is really consistent, and like consistent, I mean like look at the pattern. So consistency doesn't mean quantity. It doesn't mean like quickly or a lot of times a day, but it means whatever their baseline is, if that changes. So for example, if you are texting every day, calling, doing that consistently, and then all of a sudden you're getting one word texts every 3 days and they're not reaching out as much, that inconsistency is telling you something. It might be something going on with them and that they need, all their energy needs to be on that. But a lot of times it's a really good indicator that they are not in it, that they don't want it. And a lot of times early on in dating, especially when there's a lot of text conversations, there's a lot of getting to know you over that, there can be a time when there just isn't the desire to continue. And it's really kind of like, well, what do? We're just texting. It's not a relationship. It's not nothing you have to like break off or break up. But there also isn't really like a clear way to say, hey, I've enjoyed chatting with you, but I don't see this going any further. That is very acceptable. That is what you should be doing. But that is not something that a lot of people are aware of. So that's where we get ghosting. That's where we get lots of questions. That's where we get the anxiety cycles that we are just overthinking. That's where we get all of this uncomfortable thing. If you're texting someone and getting to know them in that way, and if you don't want to anymore, just be bold. Say like, hey, I've enjoyed this. I don't really see this going anywhere anymore. And I'd like to stop our communication. That is kind to you and to them. And so if we are, gaining new skills here, this is a good thing to think about. And also, when you're in a relationship and there's inconsistency in communication, I would just check on them. Just be like, hey, I noticed that you're inconsistent with this. We usually talk X amount and it's been lower or it's been more. Like, what's going on with you? I think this is a really good question. But a lot of times this inconsistency is telling you a bigger picture. It is a glimpse, it's a symptom of something bigger going on. And sometimes that's just not interest anymore, and sometimes there's more things going on. So I'd always check. But that is something to look out for. It's not always the quantity of communication, it's not always the amount of times they're texting you a day, but it's what they do and then what they're changing, how they're doing it is the thing to look out for. All right, now here are the 2 red flags that you might be having for yourself that I am going to give you some tough love on, because we can look at the red flags of other people all day long, but if we're not taking care and taking seriously our role in dating, then what's the point, really? We're just adding to the red flags of other people. Okay, so the first red flag that we might be experiencing is not seeing the other person for what they're showing you they are. Okay, if you're feeling called out, good. Here's the thing. People tell us who they are by their words, their actions, how they treat you. And it's a huge issue if we are not seeing them for who they're showing us to be. It kind of goes along with the second red flag of theirs, which is their words and their actions don't line up, because sometimes we can get into the trap where their actions are showing us one thing, their character is showing us one thing, but then they're sweet talking us. They're saying no, and they're quieting our concerns if we bring them up. But what we really have to do is trust our eyes. We have to trust how they're treating us, their character, their actions, how they speak to us, how they present us to other people. We have to take in the whole picture and truly discern, hey, is this somebody who I want to continue a relationship with based on what they're showing you? That is huge. And I see so many people stuck in relationships where they're constantly in this cycle of, I don't like how he treats me, I don't like this and this and that. But every time I bring it up, he's apologetic. He's saying that all these things are happening. Or, the opposite way too. I hear this from men as well. So it's just what they're showing you, take that seriously. See what they're showing you and take it at face value. All right, the last red flag, the second one for you, would be being more invested in how they see you than how you see yourself. This is a trap that so many people fall into, that we are so concerned with showing up in the way that we think that they want us to show up as. Maybe they've told you, maybe you have hints, maybe they've talked about people in the past, and maybe whatever the case may be, you have this idea of who you think they want. And so we are trying to shape what we do and say and how we dress and how we act to show up as the person we think they want. So we're putting more effort into taking seriously how they see you, how they see us, than how you see yourself. Now, how you see yourself is really important on a number of levels, because number one, you have to be proud of yourself, how you're acting, what decisions you're making. There is nothing worse than getting to the point in a relationship and kind of like coming up for air and being like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, this is not it. And you get out of that situation, and then you're just beating yourself up because you're like, I don't like who I became in that. I don't like how I acted. I should have caught this sooner. I should have taken this more seriously. All of these shoulds. And so when we're taking a look at, how do I see myself in this more early on and more closely, that can really help us avoid a lot of that pain. Because if we're looking at how we see ourselves and we're taking an honest picture of that, are we proud of our actions? Are we proud to be in a relationship with this person based on their character, based on how they treat us? Are you treating them well? How do you see yourself? That's really important. Another way that it's really important is if you have dreams and goals of your own and you are putting in the effort to personally develop into a person who can achieve those things, and you get into a relationship and you start to forget all of that because you're so focused on the other person, that's also not the healthiest, because how you see yourself and how you are putting the effort in and doing those things and developing yourself is important in every season of life. And so it's not just important before you get married, and then it's never important again. That's who you are. But it's important before you get married. It's important while you're dating, because you are always evolving and you want to be conscious of what that direction looks like. You want to be pointing yourself in the right direction. And then in the next phases of engagement and marriage, and then you maybe you're raising a family or you're in your career, and these things matter. How you are putting in your effort and you're developing as a person matters in every stage of life. Who you're becoming matters in every stage of life. No matter what your vocation is, you don't just wake up one day when it's time to enter into that vocation and have all the things, be the person who can do that well. You have to be becoming that person all along. So this matters. It matters a lot. If these red flags, these first 5 that I talked about, are present in the person that you're, pursuing or discerning a relationship with, they may not be the person for you. But there's also a myth going around that I think a lot of us want to believe, and that is one day someone will show up who's so perfect that we'll just get into a relationship that's perfect and that we're already there. But that's not true also, and it's not practical to kind of hold on to that idea. Because here's the truth. Great relationships are built. They are not discovered. So what I mean by that is that relationships are between 2 imperfect people, okay? They always are. Everyone is imperfect. And only you can control your input and your output. Only you can control your effort, your growth, right? And we talked about this, you can't control anyone else's effort in growing themselves. We cannot control anyone else's thoughts or feelings or attraction. We can't control any of that. All we can control is our own effort. And so when you find someone who is growth oriented, when you find someone whose effort is allowing them to better themselves, that is really great. But that's not the only thing to look for, right? We know attraction has to be there, and faith and values and all of that other stuff needs to be present. But when you find someone like that who does share all of those things, that's wonderful. But you better be doing that too. You better be putting in that effort. You better be on your way as well. Because otherwise, that person you're looking for is not going to be looking for you, because they also want someone who is growth oriented, who has that effort, who is investing in themselves and investing in their development as a person, in relationships, and all of the areas. So your growth isn't optional. It is optional. You get to choose, but you also get to choose to do it or not to do it. And I would say doing it would bring you the best chance of attracting someone who also has those same things in mind, who's also growth oriented, who's also putting in the effort. I have a resource called The Leading Lady Standard, what really matters in a man and what doesn't. This can be found on my website. It's a really great resource for women who are starting to take this seriously but don't know exactly what to look for and what's not as important. And so this resource gives you all of that. So if that's interesting to you, you can go on my website and purchase this resource. Until next time, I'm cheering for you.